What's something that Adam has taught you that you've been able to learn from what Adam goes through?
Oh, wow. Such a beautiful question. Yeah, because you think an awful lot about me putting myself into Adam, but I suppose that sounds dodgy. Sorry. New Year's Day.
Hello. Hi. Happy New Year. Oh, hold the applause, not for me. Let's not. I'm Scheetz. I'm the entertainment editor at Queerty. I am so thrilled to kick off 2024 with all of you here with this incredible film and with our star, Andrew Scott, who is right here. Let's hear it for Andrew.
Hi, everybody. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, indeed. How are the first, how deep into the day are we? How are the first few hours of 2024?
A little ropey.
Yeah, okay.
No, pretty good actually, not too bad. Yeah.
We'll take it slow today. We'll just.
Okay. God bless you all for coming to this on New Year's Day.
Yeah, this is cool. This is exciting.
Incredibly cool.
I said we were going to take it slow, but I do kind of want to, I imagine we're all still very much in our feelings, where that ending is a knockout.
Uh-huh.
So I kind of want to start at the end and just talk about, what were your first reactions to reading this in the script, this final scene? How are you feeling?
Well, I love the conversation that the final scene brings up within people, because I think some people are like, no! Make me happy! But I see it as incredibly hopeful, you know?
Yeah.
Because I feel like the whole film is sort of a little bit like a dream. And I feel like the story is complete for Adam, because he starts the film where he's just bathing in loneliness, and he conjures up his family, his parents, to show them who he is. And once he's able to do that, he's seen and he's able to be loved. And then once he's able to be loved, he can love himself, and then he ends up loving somebody else. And so even though it's a short life he has with Harry, I feel like when you see him holding somebody else, I just find that enormously beautiful. And Andrew Haigh, our director, was very moving on that. He was like, I want there to be a queer love story that ends up in the stars and takes its place among all the other love stories in the world. And that's what's so beautiful. And he's always adored that song, another great queer anthem. And he was like, I want to put that up there with all the other love stories. And that's why I even though it's heartbreaking, as I say, people say you want a happy ending, but there isn't. It doesn't really end well for any of us.
Yeah, sure. Happy New Year.
So we just try our best,
No,
to love and be loved, and then bye.
Okay, we won't talk about the endings then. We'll go back to the beginning. We'll start fresh. We got a lot ahead of us. So I guess I'm curious. Prior to this project. Sorry, runaway bottle cap.
Runaway bottle. Thank you.
How familiar were you with Andrew Haigh's work then? Had you seen his previous films? Had you met before?
Yeah, I had. I adored. I've seen all his work actually, and I always felt really seen by his work. He's incredibly prolific, but also all his work is so. He always does something that's slightly off-center, which I love about him. And I adored Weekend. I loved Looking. I loved 45 Years. Lean on Pete is such an incredible film, and he's got just a real vision, and he's very soft-hearted, but he's not sentimental, and I just adore him.
Yeah, this is certainly, as a fan of all of his work too, I see this as like a really nice not culmination, of course, there's so much more ahead, but then you see bits and pieces of everything he's done before. This is, of course, extremely personal for him, too. I don't, maybe folks have heard, but the home that we film in, Adam's home, childhood home, is Andrew's childhood home.
Not mine.
Not yours,
Andrew's.
sorry.
Yes, yeah.
So incredibly personal for him. I mean, I think as an actor, he comes to you with this, you hear about this role. Does that make it all that much more nerve-wracking then, just knowing that he's putting so much of himself in your hands?
When I got the call, because you know, you wait for calls like that, you know, and I was just so excited just to be talking to him on the phone, and then I read this unbelievably beautiful script where I just felt, oh wow, I understand that character, you know, and it made me really emotional, because films like that, I just never grew up with films like that, and just to be offered the opportunity to be at the centre of it was really amazing. Mm-hmm. So because he'd sort of offered up this extraordinary script, and then this amazing kind of vulnerable thing of offering up his childhood home, you know, for us to film in, and you have the crew sort of trample over, and you know, and we were just kept saying to him, you know, is this okay? And he just wore it so lightly. So I really felt, you know, I've got to bring my own sense of whatever my history is to the story as well. So it became like, he just became my, you know, my real comrade. I often think of other queer people as my comrades. You know, depending, you know, we all have different battles, whatever. But I do think that there's something about it, and I felt, I don't know, protective of him, because, and I think he probably did a little bit of me, because it's so, I think the film is so tender and so compassionate, and I think it represents a kind of experience for a lot of queer people that maybe hasn't been represented before, because it's not extreme. There's brutality in it, absolutely. The parents say things that are very, you know, bruising. But I do think those bruising things that families say can coexist alongside real deep love. I think that's a real experience for many people, not just queer people actually, but just the way families can. I always refer to it as accidental cruelty, you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, of course. Yeah, I mean, this kind of dovetails into what I want to ask you about, just these, I guess, this pair of like coming out scenes that we have. I mean, we've certainly never seen anything like that before, because when has there been a film that's done? Yeah. Like, that's where the brilliance of what he's done with this story really comes into play. I mean, you're just watching that, and watching you, I think I see you bringing both such a, you know, that you're playing Adam, this adult man who's saying, this is who I am, but at the same time, you're seeing ways in which he's reverting back to his childhood. And I mean, can you talk a little bit about filming those scenes with Claire and Claire Foy and Jamie Bell?
Well, I think what's sort of really interesting about that scene with Claire is that he's a man in his 40s, and he doesn't want to come out. He doesn't want to come out to his parents. You know, there's something about retaining his dignity. Yeah. That he's like, I've lived on my own for 30 years. So when she comes out with this kind of loud, confident, and wrong kind of prejudice, that there's some sort of rage that I think sparks within him, and she's speaking out of ignorance in a way, and she's speaking it with such confidence, and I feel like I think he affects the idea that it's something that, you know, it's not important for her to know necessarily, but I think it's something he desperately needs her to know. So that's a very interesting thing to play. And with Claire, she's just not afraid, and I think she's just so extraordinary in the film. She's just not afraid to play the less accessible, less maternal possibly. I kind of like in the film that's turned on its head a little bit, that it's actually Jamie's character who's probably a little bit more soft-hearted, or is certainly different-hearted in a way than the mother is. And so that scene with Jamie again was, when I read that scene, I was just like, this is just so truthful and authentic, and so I just felt like my job was to, I don't know, I always feel like the job in this is to affect a kind of childishness without going over the top, kind of thing, you know, and because our role, I think, with our parents, you know, I think a lot of us have just come from the holiday season. Exactly. It doesn't change, you know. You find yourself in these roles that you can't it's difficult to escape. And so his vulnerability with his dad, again, he says such brutal things. I mean, the idea that he would say, I heard you crying, but I didn't come at you because actually I probably would have beaten you up in school as well. It's like, whoa. Yeah. But also, he adores him, and he loves him as well. So those things can really exist. So it's just being able to kind of honor this extraordinary writing. And if you've got those actors to play opposite, it's easy.
Oh yeah, I mean they're both incredible. As it's mind blowing. I actually had been wanting to ask about the. Really the first scene that Adam encounters his father, and it almost feels like he's getting cruised a little bit.
Yeah.
You think? Yeah, okay. Maybe I was just like in the mood when I was watching it.
Yeah, you were like, what the hell? Yeah.
But I mean, that's, again, where we get into, like, we've never seen anything like this before. I mean, we certainly can grow up and have these conversations with our parents, and we all are adults and we're seeing each other eye to eye, but Adam is literally the same age as them now, and it adds this whole other dimension to it.
It does, yeah. And there's a kind of, again, I think that's really brilliantly done by Andrew, because there's also that scene in the bedroom where the kind of characters of Jamie and Paul are, where he turns around and he thinks he's going to be a dad, and then it's Paul, and there is a kind of, the way that happens in dreams. Mm-hmm. I often say to people when they see the film that I don't think it's important necessarily to try and find the right answer to the thing. Were they dead the whole time? Is he, like all that kind of stuff? Like, because when you wake up from a dream, you have a really, really strong feeling. So you can wake up desolate or laughing or full of rage or whatever it is, and you don't necessarily look to the dream for a kind of logic, but you just hold on to the real feeling. And so there is definitely a feeling. Well, I don't know, I think there's a kind of, not a sexuality in families, but there's certainly a sensuality and a closeness in families that I think, particularly between children and parents, we have a relationship with a physical relationship with our parents, and a physical relationship with our childhood home, a sensual, the smell of our childhood home is so evocative. And I remember thinking when I was going into the childhood bedroom, I was like, I bet the smell of it would be so emotive, and like what it's like to get into your parents' bed and the smell of their bed and your mother's perfume, and when he's hugging his father, what that would all have been like. I think there's a real sensual relationship with children and their parents as children, and we move away from that, obviously, and then we develop our own sexuality and all that kind of stuff. So there's definitely, because he's so isolated. And this is all a kind of dream thing. I do think there's a kind of merging between the two storylines, so to speak.
Definitely, yeah. It's very intimate. Well, you brought up Paul Mescal, and I figured no one here wanted to hear about him, so I wasn't going to ask. But maybe we should talk about him since you brought him up. The relationship between the two of you on screen it feels so real. It's so tactile. But of course, we all know, I think that the two of you have such a bond in real life too. Can you tell me a little bit about that? I mean, was it just there from day one?
Yeah, it was, yeah. It's a really weird thing, chemistry, because I know that certain performances on screen can have extraordinary chemistry and the two actors can't stand each other. That exists too.
Yeah.
But that's not the case at all here. Yeah, I just love Paul very much, and from the very beginning, I think both of us were very, delighted to be playing love. It's a beautiful thing. Mm-hmm. I still find it so pleasurable to be able to represent what my own experience of falling in love, like an authentic, like a gay love story. It's such a pleasurable thing to be able to recreate, and I think Paul really feels the same, and that's just there, and obviously with all the sex scenes and stuff, we have to, we're very lucky now, we have intimacy coordinators and stuff, and that allows you in some ways to, because you're able, with intimacy coordinators now, you're able to just say, this is a bit I feel a bit dodgy about, so you have those conversations, and actually on the day, what that does is it allows you to be much freer, actually, because frankly, if there's something that you're not pleased with it, it just won't end up in the film.
Safety
So
net of
it's a
sorts.
safety net,
Yeah.
exactly right. And so in exactly in the same way you have a verbal conversation, sex is a physical conversation. So you have to, I don't know, you have to maintain that sort of frisson. I always say acting is the art of pretending that you don't know what you're going to say next when you do, and that's exactly the same with in a physical situation as well. You have to, so you just have to be very aware of each other in the same way that we are when we've got chemistry in real life with people.
Oh, that's beautiful. I think we're going to take it to some audience questions, but I did just want to make sure I asked this one really big picture question, and it just through this whole experience of working on this film, working with Andrew, bringing so much of yourself to it. What's something that Adam has taught you that you've been able to learn from what Adam goes through?
Oh wow, such a beautiful question. Yeah, because you think an awful lot about me putting myself into Adam, but I suppose that sounds dodgy. Sorry, New Year's Day. I feel like, I don't know, it's something I feel I adore vulnerability represented on screen. And the fact that he is a character that is courageously and willfully conjuring up something that is actually going to be quite difficult for him, in order to give himself a gift, to actually have a difficult conversation, knowing probably that it's going to be thorny and that he's going to be upset, and actually that he's going to ultimately have to be brokenhearted again because his parents are going to leave him again. That's something that I think we all have to understand and accept, that we can dodge and avoid love and protect ourselves against it, and we can survive. But the most wonderful people in the world to me, and I think Adam is one of those people, that's why I think he's a kind of heroic character, is that he does that knowing that that love is sort of worth it, that it's worth it, and grief is just the price that you pay for love, you know.
I love that you just described it as a heroic character. I mean, this is such a intimate movie. You know, we've got just only so many characters that largely takes place in just a few settings. But yeah, we have this sort of
it's epic. I think that's what's sort of beautiful about the film. That there's 4 characters in it, but it's got this huge, epic life and death storyline. And I think the juxtaposition of those two, the very intimate and the very expansive, is wonderful.
Yeah. Absolutely. Okay, we are going to take a few audience questions, so let's buckle up. I was going to say, we'll just have you raise your hand, but I saw up in the grayish sweater up there.
Hi.
Hey.
How much ketamine did you
Do you mean last night, or?
So, this is all in Adam's perspectives, and we're looking through Adam's eyes most of the time.
Yeah.
But with right outside the house at the very end, when you broke the window.
Yeah.
Harry was looking at you as insane, and we were looking at you as insane, or as something snapped.
Yeah.
Then in the subway, we saw the reflection of the child screaming, and then at the door, when you went into the apartment and smelled the smell. In your character arc, when did you feel like the character had detached?
It sort of
Lost himself. I think it happens. I think it's a gradual process for him, and I think it's why his parents kind of make the decision that they're going to wrap it up, so to speak. You know, because it's costing him. The more he visits them, the more it's kind of costing him a little bit. So oddly, I kind of think the more he is becoming reattached to his parents, the less he's attached to himself. You know what I'm saying? So that actually it's giving to him, but it's also taking away from him. And in exactly the same way, I think that childhood works in some strange way, that we have to detach ourselves from something that is very healthy and nourishing in order to save ourselves in some ways and develop ourselves. So it's a really interesting question, because it's something that I thought, like, when is the moment that it actually happens? And it's definitely somewhere along there where, and like in real life, I think it's kind of difficult to know exactly when that moment is. I always find it funny in TV and film drama when they say, at that moment on you, and I'm like, no, everybody knows in that moment. They find out maybe 12 years later what they were doing will make sense to them. But I hope that answers your question in some way.
Yeah, lovely. Great question. Excellent. Yeah, right here.
That was beautiful.
Thanks.
I wonder what the name of the film means to you.
Oh, wow.
The question is what the name of the film means to Andrew.
I love the name of the film. Because that's what all we are mostly here in this room. And I love it feels like it has lots of different interpretations to it. But I love the idea that everybody in the world is a stranger until they aren't. I love the fact that it's got the word us in it. Because us is a word that is inclusive. You know, when we say us, it means, feels like it's like a tribe. And of course it is a tribe of people. And I love the kind of juxtaposition of that word us with the word strangers, because even the people that we we love end up, they can just end up being somebody that you used to know, and so I love the sort of play with the words on it. Does it mean anything to you, or no? You're just
No.
Yeah.
Well, I know the book was just Strangers.
Yes.
And then when the movie came out, all of us strangers.
Yeah.
It was different. So.
Yeah, it's a different, again, a little bit like the film. I think it's got a sort of poeticness to it, or maybe poetry is a better word. I'm glad I wasn't in charge of that. But yeah.
Oh, we'll go right here. Hello.
Hi. So when you were with your parents, the movie, there's some like gesture and reaction, like only kids will do that. I was curious that how you found those.
Oh, yeah.
So the question is about how Andrew was able to kind of tap into these childlike behaviors and movements for this role.
It's really fascinating. I find it really, it's that thing that I was sort of talking earlier on about the thing, I was in the airport a couple of weeks ago and I saw this baby like literally biting his mother's face. And the mother didn't really love the way, she was just like, oh, stop. There is a kind of directness that I think is beautiful. And I remember when my godchildren were kids, when they didn't want you to say something that they didn't want to hear, when they just put their it's like it's all that kind of stuff. I was very aware, being in the bed with Claire, to be sort of that feeling where you're sort of lower than your parents in some way, just physically sort of, in some ways, subordinate to them, in some ways that you're just sort of looking up and just putting yourself, I don't know, just imaginatively. I think if imaginatively you kind of go somewhere, then I think it bleeds into your physicality slightly. So that's what the it was actually. I found it quite a physical role, the whole role actually, in both sides of the storyline actually, in different ways obviously, but it doesn't necessarily seem it, but it feels like quite a physical part. Yeah.
Right back here. Yeah.
Hi.
When the character of Adam sees his parents again, or even just his dad for the first time, there's almost this kind of expectancy, or at least like a lack of being very shocked to see them again, or at least kind of falling into comfort with them again really quickly, despite having gone more of his life without them than with them. Kind of what was your interpretation of that? How quickly he fell back into a routine?
Yeah.
So the question here was about just how Adam is not necessarily like, oh my gosh, my parents, they're ghosts.
Yeah.
I'm being a little bit liberal with my interpretation. No.
I know what you mean. It's like, it was a big question of mine, is like, how much, oh my god, this is so weird, do you play? But a little bit again, like a dream. In a dream, the way you just sort of accept things that are completely illogical as logical. I also think he's conjured them up himself in some way. He's writing this story about them, and so there's a kind of strange inevitability about it, or that when he sees his father and then his mom. But I think I also felt, just to help the audience, I think it would be helpful for the protagonist to, in that first scene, just to be a tiny little bit, what the fuck is going on in his head? So that if you guys are going, what is this? That you see him going, what is this as well? So it sort of helps. So I feel like that's the interesting thing about playing a protagonist. It's like you in some ways, I have to be sort of sitting in the audience with you, whereas when you're playing a supporting character, as fun as that can be, you don't. It's a different sort of experience. So yeah, it's a really interesting one about just how you guide the audience through, and also the same thing kind of applied for the two storylines, because there could be a danger that the storylines could be just running too separately, but actually each time he returns to the house, it affects the storyline with Paul, and that storyline with Paul affects when he goes back to the house. So it's just keeping imaginatively everything in your head as a sort of storyteller in a way.
Great, I can maybe get one more in. We're gonna go up to the back, sorry, I've gotta make sure I'm bringing everyone in. Maybe third row, second row behind the rail with the mask.
Hi.
First of all, love the 80s music, and it kind of made me think kind of about like nostalgia and kind of what generation that Adam is from. So how is that having those two conversations kind of about how the language has changed and kind of the two different generations that Harry and Adam are from, and
Yeah.
did those kind of also manifest in real life with Paul?
Yeah.
This is a question about the generational sort of difference. It's a really interesting that one. I do think there's a generational difference, and then I also think there isn't a generational difference. I think one of the big things is the aftermath of the AIDS crisis. I think that's something that is kind of present in the film. I grew up slightly just after that, and there was a real feeling that if you were sexual or in some way physical, that you were going to be punished for that. And there was a fear, and that was so much part of our community that you just lost people for absolutely no reason, and because of terrible neglect by our governments in relation to the investigation into that disease. But there's also conversations with Paul where he's talking about being a stranger in his own family, and so we can talk an awful lot about sex positivity and sex forwardness that I think is wonderful that exists today. But I do think that there are a lot of people, and I'm very gratified that younger people really see themselves in the film too, because I don't think that is a matter of generational. Differences in prejudice, generational. You know what always sort of really surprises me when people say, "Come on, it's 2024. You got to get with it. Come on," as if like 2024 has anything to do with it. Because in 2074, they're going to look at us like we're cavemen. They're going to go, "What the hell is?" And different forms of human sexuality and gender identity have existed since the dawn of humanity. It's not something that was invented, with the media age, which I sometimes think we think it is, in the 1960s. That all of a sudden there's this influx of different types of sexuality. That is literally has always been part of humanity, different forms of sexuality aside from heterosexuality, and it will exist until humanity ends. So this kind of idea that it's a sort of current topic is completely nonsensical to me. So for that reason, the problems exist in the assumption, both in 2024 and in 1994 or 1964, that everybody is straight until proven otherwise. That's where so many of our problems, I think, come from. And it's something I think a lot of young queer people experience, and maybe it's only small. But the minor nature of the sort of slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, the little stings that people have to go through, which is like if you've got a wife, you're in a taxi and someone goes, the assumption when you talk to 6-year-olds is that they're all straight until proven otherwise. And I think if we could slightly alter that in a very gentle and compassionate and kind way, the way we speak to our children, just as a possibility that they might be something other than straight, I think that would be a wonderful thing for our society.
Oh goodness, yeah. Beautifully put. that's kind of the lovely grace note to end
Okay.
this conversation.
Okay, cool.
Andrew, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
We're gonna ask that everyone stay seated while we can make sure we get you out of here.
Oh, okay, okay.
So,
Happy New Year, everybody.
but
Thank you
yes.
so much for coming.
Thank you
Really
again.
appreciate it. Thank you. Tell your friends.
All right, thanks everyone. Happy 2024.